the dock is a really, really important part, because now you've found the bait, you've caught the bait, you've properly dehooked the bait. The one thing I didn't talk about with dehooking is very, very important. On most boats, we have multiple live wells. The way we handle it on our boats is the transom live wells are working well. That's the well that we're going to fish with throughout the day. So a bait that's either got a little bit of blood, maybe hooked a little deep, or hits the deck goes in the transom, because that's our day bait. That's the bait we know we need to use today. And then all the baits that are perfectly hooked in the lip, we can get them over a bucket or the floor well. For safety reasons, we usually use them. We have big Yeti buckets. They have big, smooth mouths. We'll put 4 or 5 baits in a Yeti bucket, and then we'll pour them in the floor. And now you haven't disturbed the slime. You haven't done anything to hurt them. Their odds of survival in the bait pen are much better because they were properly hooked. They never hit the deck. No blood. Everything went well with them. So now we've gotten any questions on that part? Day bait versus what we call pen baits. So perfect baits go into bigger wells, usually the floor wells, and of course if we need them during the day, we pull them out. But if we don't end up using them, now we know they'll have a really good chance of living in the bait pens. So the idea behind the bait pen is to simplify your day. You know, if you can have bait sitting at the dock, whether it's your dock or somebody else's dock, if you got a place that you can put a bait pen, it really simplifies the process of going fishing. Because what happens if you don't get off work till after lunch? You know, maybe the bait guy isn't available. You know, the bait guy usually, maybe he's out of bait, whatever. When you have bait in a bait pen, 2 things are important to think about. One, you might actually go fishing more if you have bait in the bait pen because it's there and you know you can just go grab some bait and go. And secondly, the bait that lives in a bait pen for any length of time, believe it or not, is a better quality bait and a more lively bait than a bait that was just caught. Now, I'm not saying that bait that was just caught is bad. I like fresh thread fins, I like fresh sardines. But when you talk about baits that will go in a pen, like a goggle eye or a pilchard, cigar minnows, that actually all the baits, once they have been in a pen and started eating over a period of a week or 2, it's just like an athlete. You know, when he has a week off, what does he do? He gets really strong. They know that team's going to be strong because they rested. Well, the same thing applies for bait pens. So that's why we go through all this mess with all these, you know, different rigs and dehookers and dip nets and pins. Because when we can get to that point of having seasoned baits, we're tournament ready. Now, if you go fish sailfish tournaments, the vast majority of the boats are not fishing fresh baits. The vast majority are fishing seasoned baits. That's just something that not a lot of people know. If you have to use fresh baits in the tournament, you're actually feeling a little bit like you don't have the advantage. If I have goggle eyes that are 3 or 4 weeks old, how do you know the difference? Two things. I'll tell you a real quick story that will really show you the difference. One year, this would have been in the late 90s, we were fishing tournaments and had a big pen, and we had a couple bites in the tournament that we had just put out a fresh spread of baits, but it was a multiple, and we kind of needed to just bring everything in. Let's go catch this multiple. And so we had good baits, seasoned baits that we had just put out. We wound them in, unhooked them, put them in the well, and then at the end of the day, of course, we didn't use those because we had enough baits that had not been hooked yet. At the end of the day, I went to put everything in the pen, and I saw those dozen baits, and I thought, I don't know why I'm doing this, you know. They're just going to die because we grabbed them, hooked them, grabbed them again, put them in the well. About 2 weeks later is our next tournament, and I asked the mate, hey, did you dip those baits out? Because I figured there'd be 10 or 12 or something dead ones. He goes, no, I didn't dip any dead ones out. I go, man, that's really strange. I started dipping them in the boat, and all of a sudden I realized there's 11 or 12 baits with black holes in their back. If they would have been fresh baits, that absolutely would not have happened. Fresh baits, the slime coat is so thin that you would have disturbed the slime enough that they would have gotten infected and eventually died. Slime on a bait fish, especially a smooth skinned bait fish like a cigar minnow or a goggle eye or blue runner, believe it or not, the clear slime performs the same duty as your physical skin. So if you take the slime off of a goggle eye, for instance, you grab them fresh, you take the hook out, you throw them in the well, an hour later, look at the live well and see what you see. Same with the blue runner. You'll see finger marks on his back. But what that is the beginning of abrasion. You took the slime off, it's no different than abrading your skin. What would happen an hour later? It would start to turn dark. It would be the beginning of a scab. And that's what really happens when you disturb the slime. So that will explain a lot of what we'll get into next. When we go to dip baits, I built my first one of these about 15 years ago in Fred Herman's shop. And it was all plastic, it was vinyl, just all window material. I took a hole puncher and punched it. And I had mixed reviews, my mates hated it because it held water and you got splashed. But I just knew in my heart it was better for the bait because there was nothing rough. And, I would use it with certain mates, other mates hated it, and it just kind of, lingered out there. I never did much with it. And a few years back, I had the chance to make them commercially, and we trademarked it the wet net, and it's designed for this step of getting the bait from your boat to the bait pen and from the bait pen back to your boat. The idea is if you were dipping like this net would be a good transfer net. This is our medium, so this is a large. You see that might be a little big for a lot of live wells on boats, but this medium is the perfect size. So it'll hold that much water, and if it's too much water, Mike, back up. The battery recharge. Anyways, that little bit of water that you can hold in the bottom of this net allows the bait to stay wet, and so they're calmer. And also, they don't rub against each other like they would in a mesh net because the water stretches that clear vinyl out. And so I've got pictures of 2 and 3, 4 baits in the wet net, all kind of just sitting side by side. So that's the cool thing about it. Now the downside is it is a little heavier. You're lifting water with every stroke, but I really think that if you're going to go through the process of trying to season baits, whether you make one or buy one, something with a solid bottom is really worth it. And I've been using these models for about a year and a half now, and I'm really, really happy with them. We've modified a few things already. They collapse, they got buttons. The big one actually has an expandable, retractable handle and all that. So, again, how many times have you seen, whether it's kids or just somebody, when they go to scoop bait, there's 10 baits in the net. We call it the fry daddy. It sounds like a fish fryer when they pick it up. Never good. It doesn't matter so much that moment, right? The bait you get out there is frisky. But what do you think happens 4 hours of doing that, or 5 or 6 hours of doing that? By the end of the day, you see the baits down there lazy. So this is where a wet net would pay off in tournament fishing. Or, I tend to think that it's important every day. But if you're in a tournament, that's when it's really important because it's the baits between 3 and 4 o'clock that really matter. Because that's when you need to have fresher bait than the rest of the fleet. So we make both of these nets in just fine mesh. For the downside of the wet net is when you push it through the water, it goes a little slower. But what happens is because it's clear, a lot of baits will swim right into it. It's really strange. You hold it down there, and all of a sudden there's 6 baits in it. You got to get a few of them out of it. They'll just be nosing into the plastic. But for those that want a traditional net, these are double wall butterfly mesh. So they're the softest that could be. But for somebody that doesn't, like I said, a lot of my crew didn't like the wet nets, but I personally like it because I really believe in it. But if you're old school and you just want a mesh net, that's as soft as it gets, and double wall gives you more durability. So you get a little nick in it, you still have another pan. So, got to be a question out of all that. Make something up. No? Man, you guys want me to get out of here. Anyways, so we get to the dock, we got the baits, we use the nets, we get the baits in the well. If you have a wet net, I say 2 or 3 baits at a time. If you got a mesh net and you're going to put them in the bin, I still say 1 bait at a time. And one last thing, if you go to dip water in this, let's say you only got 1 bait in it, or you just don't think you need that much water, all you got to do is tilt it, and you can get it drained down to whatever level. You don't have to lift a full scoop of water every time. As soon as you lift it up, drain a little water out, set it in I like to set the net in the well and be gentle with the bait. And you'd be surprised, that little bit of time you take handling your baits really increases your survival rate. There's about 5 things you can do to really compromise the survival of your baits. I'll take you through them real quick. 1, crowding. So if you're more than about, on bigger baits, 1 bait per gallon, that's kind of your limit. 50-gallon well, 50 thread fins, 50 goggle eyes. That would be max. As a matter of fact, I like about 40. But if you're talking pilchards or sardines, you can definitely go 50 or even 60. So a little higher than 1 per gallon on smaller baits and sardines, and a little less on big thread fins and goggle eyes and blue runners. So numbers in the well, of course, proper dehooker, that would be number 1. Proper size and use of the dehooker, not hitting the deck. 1 bait per gallon, plus or minus. And then when you run in, try to pressurize your wells. So let's say you've got a well and it's 6 inches down to the lid and it's rough, and you want to go 40 miles an hour because it's a following sea and you can do it. It's not too bad for the boat. But what you're really doing in that hour or that 40 minutes it took you to get through that rough water, you have just put them through a spin cycle in a washing machine. And again, if you get to the dock, they're going to go, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. You're going to put them in there, and a week later, or even 4 days later, you're going to go, man, must be some bad water around here. I've heard that 100 times, The first marina I went into in Monty's in Coconut Grove, the water was black. I don't know if you've really been around Monty's much, but it's just silty west edge of the bay, at least a little bit of wind, just black water. And I pulled in there, and there was a captain, there was a charter boat in there already, a guy named Mark. And he sees me with my bait pen. I had one about that size. I put it in the water, and I had a few cigar minnows I was going to put in there. He goes, what are you doing with that bait pen? I said, I don't know, I got a few baits I'm going to try to keep them there. He goes, you're wasting your time, buddy. Look at this water. This water doesn't hold anything. Wow. Yeah, it is pretty dirty. I really didn't know. But I got them. I threw them in there. A week later, they're all alive. Las Olas Marina. Bahia Mar. I mean, you look at the water, sometimes you go, oh my God, that's terrible. The only thing I'll tell you that they won't tolerate is salinity and below about 68 degrees. Those are the 2 things that you really got a problem. So let me finish the 5 things. Proper dehooker, plus or minus 1 bait per gallon. Pressurize your wells, don't slosh them. And then when you go to dip them, either a super soft net 1 at a time or a wet net, 2, 3, 4 at a time. And then the 4th thing is a bait pen that's not full of oysters and barnacles, and feed them high quality food. We've struggled over the years with always coming up with the right food, so I've been working for about 1.5 years on, actually it's been longer than that. I worked with Pat at Bionic for about 1 year on frozen, krill and fish meal and different things. And I realized that you can't really, frozen product is just difficult. But he was super helpful and kind, and he put up with all my questions and samples and this and that. But one day, I think he was happy to get rid of me. He's like, hey, go talk to my friend. He sells dried food. That may be the better choice. And so we finally spent about 1.5 years with that poor guy. And now we finally got it. So this is a wet food. This is all preservative, salt preservative, basically. And it's krill, fish meal, and shrimp meal. All very palatable, small enough to feed the smallest baits, but your bigger baits will eat it, plus pellets. Same basic food, just in 2 forms. The deal is, pellets, of course, sink. Even though these sink kind of slow, we do that on purpose so the fish have time to eat it. It takes time. You have to sit there for half an hour dribbling it in. I say that's for the private captains, after lunch sitting on the phone. I'm sorry if there are any of you here, I'm sorry. But for me, I got a chunk of this, throw it in that tray, and go do some work in the engine room. So anyways, that's kind of the deal. This is designed just to cut off a piece, put it in a Ziploc. Once you open it, of course, refrigerate it. And the idea behind the food tray and the bait pen is so that the bait stays kind of centered where the bait can eat it. The fruit stays centered. So imagine if I were to take a chunk of that and just throw it in there and it was Las Olas Marina, where would it go? Down current side, what's it feeding? All the fish outside the pen. So having the tray kind of more centered allows it to, the baits will find it and they'll get where they can eat the bait before it leaves the pen. So that's the concept. So the way the soft food works is it just slowly sheds over a couple hours depending on how much you put in it. So, questions? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, the question is how often do you have to feed them? They'll eat every day. So you got to remember the metabolism is pretty high, and the more you feed them, of course, I don't think you're going to overfeed them, but the mistake most people make is not feeding them enough. And that's the idea. That's why I like the soft food is you kind of put it in there, and they may even, if it takes a long time And what really dictates, let me back up, what dictates how long it lasts is wave action and current. Right? If you're sitting in a marina with zero wind, zero current, yes, it's gonna, every time a boat goes by or a bird lands on the pin, there's gonna be some shedding, but not nearly as much as in a day where you're in a choppy marina. But the more time it takes for that food to shed, it's kind of like us, right? We can eat a little bit, take a break, and come back and eat again. So that's the idea behind this solid food. Typically, it's about every 1 or 2 days, and if that bait pin was full, I'd feed probably a half of that every other day. That's about what it'd be. This is 3 pounds, so a pound and a half. I'd have about 60, 70 baits in that pin, maybe 80, depending on size. And again, if they're still ravenous, put more. I mean, that's really the rule. But there's one more little thing to know about feeding baits. When you put fresh baits in a pen, it's typically 2 to 4 days before they'll eat. And that's just because of the process of being taken out of the wild and introduced into a different habitat. The first thing they'll eat is, unfortunately, something no one sells, is fish eggs. Fish roe is probably the most desirable, followed closely by krill. And some might argue krill's better, but I'm going to tell you, when you put fish eggs in there, you can almost force them to start eating it. Even when they won't eat anything else, they'll eat fish eggs. But once you get them to eat, then you can start transitioning them to other foods. And then once they get used to that, I'm going to tell you something, it's kind of hard to believe, but once you really start feeding them, they'll become like pets. I hate to say this, but you go there and open the lid and they're all like, looking at you, it's pretty cool. So we're talking about one other question a lot of people ask is, how long will they live? Well, Charmaine and I fished about 8 seasons together in tournaments on Get Lit and different boats. And one year we had this bait, we still talk about it. It was a tinker mackerel about that big. And, perfect bait, but we named him George. And George went fishing with us probably through about 8 or 10 tournaments. We would never use George. He was our good luck charm because we caught a lot of fish whenever George was with us. It became a superstition, that just kind of got, how it is, boat full of people are all, you develop an idea and no one wants to break that, break that streak. So we took George probably about almost an entire season, and then one tournament we were really struggling. We put George out, and there was a big ceremony, and I think a kingfish cut him in half, and that was it. And then we didn't catch anything, and we thought we were cursed. So that's the George story. You can ask Charmaine about George. She'll know exactly what you're talking about. But anyways, any more questions?